I've never heard of lethal humidity. What is it?
Well, put simply, it's weather that can kill you.
Hi, I'm Krista with Minderoo Foundation, and I'm here today with
Robert, and I'm at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.
And we are here to answer a series of questions to give you context about the issue of lethal humidity. The first question has come in, Robert. What is it?
With climate change, we all know that the temperature's going up. But the other thing that's happening is that humidity, the moisture, is going up. And when you put those two things together, at certain temperatures, you just won't survive out, even if you're resting in the shade. So that's the point at which we call it lethal humidity.
And is that something, Robert, that happens only in places that are already hot? Are we seeing this more and more?
Well, it's definitely something that happens in many places that are hot, but it's also going to affect everyone on the planet because as the climate warms, there's more water in the air, temperatures are going up, so even places that aren't currently really hot are going to become really hot, and with humidity, dangerous.
So isn't humidity really just like sticky weather? How is it different?
It really is like sticky weather, but it's sticky weather that is over the top. Because if your body can't perspire and it's really hot and you get no relief, then this sticky weather becomes like having a big blanket suffocating your body. And eventually, if you don't get air conditioning or get to a cooler place fast, you can die. So this is another part of lethal humidity that is really important. Okay, here's another question that's come through. Who's most at risk with lethal humidity?
I think that gets to the heart of the matter. And what we are seeing in our society here in Australia and communities right around the world is that those most at risk are those who are already vulnerable in different ways. So those who are living in challenging socioeconomic circumstances where poverty is a real issue. We are seeing those with underlying health conditions, the young and the elderly, particularly in communities right around the world. Those who work outdoors, so laborers who depend on an income stream, which means they need to be out in the conditions, in the heat and in the humidity. We are seeing also women in particular, those with most caring responsibilities, everywhere around the world, experiencing really difficult challenges getting cool, getting physically to places that are more cool. And when people have to be in a situation where they have no way out, there is no other accessible option for them, they're suffering greatly and exponentially on top of the situation that they are already finding themselves in.
Yeah, and I know with the elderly, the point at which the temperature and humidity level at which it becomes lethal for older people is lower than it is for other people, younger people, people in the prime of their lives. So yeah, there's a big impact on elderly people in particular as well.
And that would be something that would have to go, I would think, into planning considerations.
Absolutely.
More and more for that sector.
Yeah.
Could this happen in Australia too?
Absolutely. In Australia, we're already seeing heat waves becoming more frequent, lasting longer, becoming more intense. And actually, heat waves are the leading cause of death in Australia. If you combine all those other hazards, fires, floods, storms, put up them all together, they still don't come close to causing the number of deaths each year that heat waves cause and extreme heat causes in Australia. We've heard about climate change impacts for decades. Why are we just talking about lethal humidity now?
Climate, I think, and the science and the research and the policy development and the corporate accountability standards that all go with climate and reacting to climate tends to be siloed, tends to fit in where you would put environment issues, where you would put sustainability issues, less so, I think, in other sectors of society. But climate really is cross-cutting. So we are seeing the impacts of climate in terms of labor conditions, in terms of health, in terms of actual agriculture, food production, water availability and accessibility, and what we're talking about right now, lethal humidity, human survivability. So I think overall the research, the science, the development behind climate planning really is coming together. Lethal humidity cascades all across those other impacts and looking at the other climate tragic events we experience in terms of coastal inundation, erosion, sea level rise, floods, droughts, salt, inundation for crops, et cetera, lethal humidity, I think now is really bringing the focus more and more back to people and back to what that means as a human being facing a changing climate. We know about temperature rise. We know what it feels like to be on a sort of hot summer sticky day, but bringing all of those issues together, I think in a very human way, is increasing the focus. And lethal humidity, I think really the consequences running through all those issues, we're seeing an increased focus more and more on this issue.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I'd add to that is, the climate science of just dealing with heat is really complicated. And for a while, that's one of the other reasons scientists have just focused mostly on the heat, not the humidity. Because when you bring those two together, it becomes much more complicated. But scientists are now doing that. And they're also looking at these compound, these simultaneous, these climate disasters or impacts that happen almost together and cause these ripples effects. And a great example of that is what we experienced during Black Summer here in Australia, where we had a record heat wave, record drought, both linked to climate change, that together then triggered record bushfires that burned 20 million hectares and caused huge loss of biodiversity, air quality that killed hundreds of Australians over the longer term, and almost a water crisis in Sydney because the fires at one point were threatening the main dam that supplies 80% of Sydney's water. We just missed that bullet. But with climate impacts and lethal humidity interacting with these other climate impacts, it'll be harder to miss the bullet next time.
And I imagine that that's very challenging for those planning for such events because it is so many considerations to take into all of the factors in terms of planning. It's everything you've just explained. It's across health, it's across water, it's across food, it's across wildlife management, and it's across the very nature of human survival.
But we have to do it because if we don't come to terms with that, we're going to be surprised by the huge impacts, the way it hits us. And we've got great tools now like artificial intelligence that can help us bring all this stuff together and make sense of all the information and how these things can cause ripple effects and where we need to intervene, where we need to interrupt them so that they don't continue to ripple.
And I think where that's really starting to cut through more and more is it can be quite overwhelming to consider all of those events at once. But where those touch points are that we really need to lean into what science is telling us, where we need to intervene, and we need to intervene now.
Yeah, I think one of the places to start with that is not top down, but actually bottom up, because all those impacts come together ultimately in hurting communities and individuals and families. And it's all integrated at that level. It's like, it's not just a fire, but I can't get transport out of my property. I can't get food from the market. It's affecting my future economy because my farm's burned down. All of those things that are in silos at the senior, federal government level are not in silos at the family community level. And that's why I think it's a great idea to start at the bottom, not at the top.
What happens to your body when it gets too hot and humid?
Everything starts shutting down. And if you've been in that hot and humid heat for a long enough time, there's no going back. It's essentially like trying to unscramble an egg. That's how serious it is. And this is exactly one of the things we focus on in the report on lethal humidity. It's a really important aspect.
What did your report actually find?
Well, it found that in the future, up to half of the total world population could be exposed to these lethal humid events. And that is a phenomenal number of people. And it's why we have to take this issue so seriously and treat it as an urgent priority.
It's almost overwhelming to think about that number of people experiencing this so soon. Is this in all parts of the world?
Well, all of the world will be affected directly and indirectly by high heat and high humidity. But the places where it is most likely to first hit, and it is already, is in places that are warm and humid already, mostly the tropics, places like Indonesia, other countries in Southeast Asia, South Asian countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, parts of Central America, West African countries. These are all places with huge numbers of people and huge numbers of people who are living in poverty or are marginalized in one way or another. Was there anything in the report that made you go, wow, or oh my God?
So many things in the report, Robert, are so insightful and terrifying and urgent and just so sobering overall. Some of the points that really struck me were knowing that for every 1 degree of temperature rise, we have something like 7% humidity rise. So we are looking, as we approach a world and rapidly go beyond, a 1.5 degree change, that we've gone up something like 10% humidity levels. That's shocking when you think about that rise. So you don't need to go up very much in terms of temperature rise to have a very steep increase in humidity levels. And I think what that means in a place like Indonesia really struck me in the report are these cascading effects that we are seeing. So as the temperature goes up a little bit by little bit and humidity is going up quite a bit, you are also seeing the impacts to food security. You're seeing the impacts to migration and displacement. You're seeing impacts in terms of an overwhelmed healthcare system. You are seeing impacts in terms of the economy and poverty and people's livelihoods, and all of that coming together. For example, the report really touches on Indonesia. That's absolutely shocking to think about anywhere on the planet dealing with all of that all at once. And so much we have to do and so much we have to learn. And that really came through to me in the report.
Yeah. I was in Indonesia after the earthquake and tsunami quite a while ago and involved in a relief operation. And I remember there were tens of thousands of people living out. Their buildings had been destroyed. They were living in nylon tents. And I remember going inside those tents and they were unbearably hot. So people could not even take shelter in those tents. So if I imagine increasing heat and humidity for people in those sorts of situations, it's going to be really bad.
And it's not something that we can escape from in that context, that even when you're in the shade, as the report touches on, even when you are resting in the shade, you are still experiencing the same moisture levels in the air, and what that does to you and to your family is almost unbearable to think about. And so what really struck me in the report overall, though, was that taking such a sobering topic and cascading implications of climate change really ends in hope, really ends on notes that there are things already being done, there are things that we can do, and there are things that we need to take action on very urgently to make sure that we don't see more of what you saw in Indonesia. Robert, is there anything we can actually do about this?
Oh my God, there's so much we can do about this. Just takes a little will. We've got so many answers to how to help people deal with lethal humidity and extreme heat. We've got leadership, people like Andrew Forrest, who are demonstrating how quickly and efficiently you can transform from fossil fuels to renewables. We've got the fact that renewables are dropping in price so fast. Never in the history of energy has things dropped this quickly in price. And that will mean that it will be the smartest investment, smartest way you can spend your money, to spend it on renewables instead of coal and gas. So all of these things are going to accelerate the change we need to have to prevent lethal humidity.
Absolutely, Robert. And I think the work of researchers like yourself and others coming together to shine a spotlight on different aspects of lethal humidity is key. So through something called the Lethal Humidity Global Council, we are working to bring together leading researchers and to find out much more about how levels of humidity are impacting different aspects of society and our economy. And I think that's really critical. And that will then drive policy and economic and investment decisions around the root cause of climate change in terms of getting off of fossil fuel use and looking at how we reduce emissions so that they truly are real zero. Robert, if you had a magic wand to wave, what's the one thing that you would do to address the issue of lethal humidity?
I would put a price on fossil fuel use so that the people who are polluting the planet and causing the risk of lethal humidity to increase will be paying a fee that will not only increase the competitiveness of renewable energy, but it also is funds that could be used to help people adapt to lethal humidity and other climate threats.
And if I could take your magic wand and give it that another wave, I would add on to that absolutely that we need policy, investment, and regulatory frameworks to make sure that that's sustainable and to back that in so that we are getting to emissions that truly are real zero, as in no fossil fuel use, as quickly as possible so that we can see a world where humidity levels do not reach lethal levels.
Hear, hear. Hey, thanks for sticking around. Hope you learned a little bit more about lethal humidity. And don't forget to click on the link to get a copy of the report.
And please like and subscribe and stick around to check out some other videos.